The emerald gown was a lie. It felt cool and heavy against Ilara's skin, a sheath of impossible silk that whispered of wealth and belonging. But it was armor, not adornment. Every seam was a line of tension, every shimmer a deflection. She stood in the gilded anteroom of the Obsidian Gala, a ghost in a jewel-toned dress, and watched her husband Marcus hold court. He was magnificent in his element, a sun around which lesser celestial bodies orbited. His laugh was a carefully engineered boom of confidence that filled the space, and his hand, when it periodically found the small of her back, was a proprietor's claim, not a lover's touch. Tonight, he was accepting the Sterling Spire Award for the Triton Tower, a breathtaking skyscraper that had redefined the city's skyline. It was a marvel of cantilevered glass and steel, a structure that seemed to defy gravity with an arrogant grace. It was also her design. Every line, every calculation, every late night spent staring at blueprints until her vision blurred. It was all hers. He had taken her files, her passion, her soul, and slapped his name on them, and the world had applauded. She had endured it for years, his casual theft of her ideas, rebranding them as his own flashes of brilliance, the slow erosion of her confidence, a quiet, methodical campaign of gaslighting that made her question her own talent. He had isolated her, convincing her that the architectural world was a brutal boys' club and she needed his name, his protection, to navigate it. He was not a shield. He was a cage. A beautifully constructed, socially acceptable cage, but the bars had become brittle. The silence had become a weight she could no longer bear. She had made a decision. It wasn't a dramatic, shattering choice. It was a slow, cold dawning, the kind of realization that doesn't scream, but settles deep in your bones. Tonight, she would not stand on that stage beside him. She would not smile her practiced, vacant smile as he accepted an award for her heart's work. Tonight, she was leaving. She waited for a momentary lull in the sycophantic laughter surrounding him and moved toward him, her steps measured, her face a placid mask. She needed to tell him now, before the ceremony began, before he could drag her into the spotlight one last time. "Marcus," she said, her voice a low murmur that barely disturbed the air. He turned, his smile faltering for a microsecond as he registered the look in her eyes. It was not the adoring gaze of the wife asset he presented to the world. It was something else, something final. He excused himself from his circle of admirers, his hand gripping her elbow with bruising force as he steered her toward a recessed alcove hidden behind a marble column. "What is it?" he hissed, his public charm evaporating like mist. "You look pale. Don't you dare make a scene, Ilara. This is the most important night of my career." "Our career," she corrected softly, the words tasting like ash. "And it's over. I'm leaving you, Marcus." He stared at her. He did not seem to process the words. He was working from an old version of her, a file that had not been updated in years, a file that depicted a woman who was compliant, manageable, and grateful. This new data did not compute. "Don't be ridiculous," he scoffed, his grip tightening. "You're nervous. It's a big night. Go get some champagne and pull yourself together. We're due on stage in 20 minutes. "I won't be on that stage with you," she said, her voice gaining a sliver of steel. "I won't watch you accept that award." The incomprehension in his eyes finally curdled into rage. It was a swift, ugly transformation. The handsome mask fell away, revealing the petulant tyrant beneath. "What did you say? You have an obligation. You are my wife. Your place is by my side." "My place is my own," she replied, trying to pull her arm free. His fingers dug in deeper, a clear and painful message of ownership. "You have nothing without me," he spat, his voice a venomous whisper. "You're a nobody, an assistant with delusions of grandeur. I made you. I gave you this life." He gestured vaguely at the opulent room, at her expensive dress. "You think you can just walk away from this? From me?" Panic, cold and sharp, began to prickle beneath her composure. His face was too close, his breath hot with anger. The muffled sounds of the gala felt a world away. They were in a pocket of private violence amidst a sea of public celebration. "Let go of my arm, Marcus." "You'll do as you're told," he snarled, giving her a slight shake. "You will walk out there, you will smile, and you will applaud. And then we will go home and you will learn a lesson about gratitude." She did not scream. The sound was trapped in her throat, a knot of old fears and fresh terror. Her world had shrunk to the 5 points of pressure on her arm, to the fury in her husband's eyes. This was it. The moment she had always dreaded, where his control would manifest not just in stolen credit and quiet manipulations, but in raw, physical force. She was truly alone. "I believe the lady asked you to let go of her arm." The voice was not loud. It was not threatening. It was a low, calm baritone, steady as iron wrapped in silk. It cut through Marcus's rage-filled tirade with the clean precision of a surgeon's blade. It came from the shadows of the alcove, from a man who had been standing there, utterly still, observing. Marcus whipped his head around, his face a mask of indignation. "Who the hell are you?" "This is a private conversation." The man stepped forward into the soft light. He was tall, dressed in a charcoal suit of such exquisite tailoring it seemed less like clothing and more like a second skin. His face was all sharp angles and quiet intensity, his eyes a dark, assessing gray. There was an aura of profound stillness about him, the kind of stillness that doesn't come from passivity, but from immense, coiled power. He did not rush. He was not performing. He was simply present, and his presence changed the very density of the air. Ilara recognized him instantly. Julian Thorne, the reclusive CEO of Thorne Industries, a global conglomerate with interests in everything from technology to private security. He was a myth in the business world, a man who rarely appeared in public. He was also the primary financier behind the Triton Tower. Julian Thorne's gaze was not on Marcus. It was on Ilara. It was a look of unnerving perception, as if he were reading the last 10 years of her life in the tense line of her shoulders and the faint tremor in her hand. "This is a private matter," Marcus repeated, trying to regain his footing. He puffed out his chest, a pathetic display of dominance. "This is my wife." Julian Thorne's eyes finally shifted to Marcus. There was no anger in them. There was something far more chilling, a complete and utter lack of interest, as if Marcus were a piece of furniture he was deciding whether to keep or discard. "You are mistaken," Julian said, his voice retaining its unnerving calm. "This is a public space. You are causing a scene, and you are assaulting a woman. Now, for the last time, release her." The command was not a suggestion. It was a statement of what would happen next. Marcus, blinded by arrogance, failed to understand this. He saw a rival, not a reckoning. "Or what?" Marcus sneered. "You'll call security? I am the guest of honor tonight." Julian Thorne gave a nearly imperceptible nod, a signal directed at something over Marcus's shoulder. 2 men, as impeccably dressed as Julian but built like mountains, materialized from the crowd. They moved with a fluid, economic grace that spoke of extensive training. There was no wasted motion. They did not touch Marcus. Not yet. They simply flanked him, their presence a silent, overwhelming pressure. The boisterous energy of the gala seemed to dim. Conversations faltered. Heads began to turn. The power in the room had shifted, tilting dramatically toward the quiet man in the charcoal suit. Marcus's face went slack with shock, then flushed with a deeper, more panicked rage. He finally let go of Ilara's arm, not because he wanted to, but because his body understood the threat his mind was still denying. He took a half step back, trapped between Julian and his silent sentinels. Julian Thorne took a step forward, placing himself between Ilara and her husband. He did not look at her, but she felt the solid wall of his presence, a sudden and disorienting shield. He addressed Marcus, but his words felt as though they were for her. "The evening is over for you, Mr. Vance," Julian said, his voice still low, yet it carried with absolute authority. "My head of security will escort you to your car. Your award will be re-evaluated." "You can't do this!" Marcus sputtered, his voice cracking. "I have a contract. The board." "The board answers to me," Julian stated simply. It was not a boast, it was a clarification of the fundamental structure of their reality. "You have made a grave miscalculation. You assumed your value was greater than your liability. You were wrong." One of the security men placed a firm hand on Marcus's shoulder. The fight went out of him instantly, replaced by a pasty, sweating fear. The performance was over. The swagger collapsed. He looked small and pathetic under the weight of so much quiet, structural power. As he was led away, his head hung in abject humiliation, he cast one last venomous look at Alara. It was a look that promised retribution. The crowd murmured, their curiosity piqued, but Julian's men were professionals. They created a seamless bubble of privacy, guiding Marcus out through a service exit with such efficiency that the incident was contained, a minor ripple in the glittering pond of the gala. The anteroom felt vast and silent now. Alara stood frozen, her hand instinctively cradling her bruised arm. The emerald dress felt less like armor and more like a costume she was desperate to shed. She looked at Julian Thorne, the man who had just dismantled her husband's life in under 2 minutes with fewer than 50 words. "Are you all right, Mrs. Vance?" he asked. The use of her married name felt like a deliberate, formal courtesy, a placeholder until she chose a new one. She could only nod, her throat tight. Words felt inadequate, clumsy. He seemed to understand. He did not press her. Instead, his gaze fell to the architectural digest clutched in her other hand, the cover of which displayed a stunning photograph of the Triton Tower. Her tower. Her fingers were white-knuckled around it. "I have a suite upstairs," he said, his tone softening almost imperceptibly. "It's quiet. My assistant Anya can bring you some tea. We should talk." She hesitated. The instinct to flee, to run from any man exerting this much control, was strong. It was a survival mechanism honed over a decade, but his eyes held no possessiveness, only a calm, steady curiosity. He was not looking at her as a prize to be won or a damsel to be rescued. He was looking at her like a puzzle he was finally getting the chance to solve. "My name," she said, her voice raspy but clear, "is Alara. Alara Keene." She used her maiden name, a name she hadn't spoken aloud in years. It felt like reclaiming a piece of stolen property. A flicker of something, approval perhaps, passed through his gray eyes. "Julian Thorne, it's a pleasure to finally meet you, Miss Keene, the true architect of the Triton Tower." The statement hung in the air between them, a declaration of a truth she thought had been buried forever. It wasn't a question. He wasn't guessing. He knew. And in that moment, the ground beneath her feet, which had felt like shifting sand for so long, suddenly felt solid. The disorientation of being seen, truly and completely seen, was more profound than the shock of the confrontation. She followed him out of the alcove, away from the noise and the lies, and toward a silence that felt for the first time like a sanctuary. The penthouse suite was less a room and more a kingdom in the sky. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city she had helped to shape, a glittering tapestry of light and shadow. The decor was minimalist, a study in charcoal, cream, and brushed steel. It was a space designed for clarity, not comfort. It was a reflection of the man who now stood by the window, his back to her, giving her a moment to acclimate. A woman with a sleek black bob and an air of formidable competence, Anya presumably, had met them at the door, spoken a few quiet words to Julian, and then guided Alara to a plush sofa. A tray with a steaming teapot and a single porcelain cup appeared as if by magic. The assistant vanished as silently as she had arrived. The entire operation was marked by a frictionless efficiency that was both impressive and intimidating. Alara wrapped her hands around the warm cup, the delicate heat a small, grounding comfort. She was still vibrating with adrenaline, her mind replaying the scene in the alcove. Marcus's face contorted with rage, the sudden, solid presence of Julian Thorne, the terrifying, exhilarating collapse of her life as she knew it. "How did you know?" she asked, her voice steadier now. Julian turned from the window. The city lights framed him, creating a formidable silhouette. "I make it my business to know the details of my investments. Thorne Industries financed 60% of the Triton project. I've reviewed every document, every contract, every blueprint." He walked over and sat in the armchair opposite her. He did not crowd her. He maintained a respectful distance, his posture relaxed, but his attention absolute. "Marcus Vance's portfolio is pedestrian," he continued, his voice a low, even cadence. "His previous buildings are functional derivative boxes, solid but uninspired. The Triton Tower is none of those things. It's audacious, it's visionary. The structural solutions for the cantilevered sections, the innovative use of reinforced polymers in the facade, it's the work of a different mind entirely. A better mind." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "The initial digital drafts, the ones from 4 years ago, were signed with a different key. EK. It took my people a few weeks to trace that signature back to an Alara Keene, a top graduate from the School of Architecture who seemingly vanished after marrying a promising young developer named Marcus Vance." Ilara felt a chill run down her spine. He had not just stumbled upon her tonight. He had been investigating. He had been searching for her. The thought was both terrifying and strangely validating. "I've been waiting for an opportunity to speak with you," he said, "without your husband's interference. Tonight, he provided one." "What do you want?" she asked, the question sharp with a decade's worth of suspicion. Men like Marcus, men with power, always wanted something. His expression did not change, but she sensed a subtle shift in his energy. "I want to offer you a position. Head of the new architectural division at Thorne Industries. We are breaking ground on our new global headquarters next year. A campus, not just a building. I want a landmark, a legacy. I want the mind that designed the Triton Tower to design it." The offer was so immense, so far beyond the scope of anything she had allowed herself to dream of, that she couldn't immediately process it. It was like being handed the sun. For years, her world had been Marcus's office, her name erased, her talent a secret commodity. "And Marcus?" she asked, the name feeling foreign on her tongue. "Marcus Vance has committed fraud," Julian stated, the words cold and precise. "He misrepresented his qualifications and the authorship of the designs to my company, the primary stakeholder. That is a breach of contract with significant financial and legal penalties. My legal team is already drafting the paperwork. His firm will be bankrupt by the end of the quarter. His reputation will be destroyed. He will not be a problem for you again." The finality of it was breathtaking. He spoke of ruin as if it were a simple line item on a balance sheet. There was no malice in his voice, no pleasure. It was the logical, inevitable consequence of an equation. Marcus was a liability, and Julian Thorne eliminated liabilities. Alara looked down at her hands. They were trembling. This was everything she had ever wanted. Her work recognized, her name restored, her abuser facing consequences. So why did she feel this profound, disorienting fear? It was the feeling of a prisoner who has been told the cell door is open. Freedom was a vast, terrifying space after so long in confinement. "I don't want to trade one cage for another," she said, the words coming out before she could stop them. It was a raw, honest admission of her deepest fear. Julian Thorne was silent for a long moment. He did not dismiss her fear. He did not offer platitudes. He simply considered her words, giving them the weight they deserved. "I am not offering you a cage, Miss Keene," he said finally. "I am offering you a toolbox, resources, a platform from which to build whatever you wish. The designs will be yours. The credit will be yours. The name on the building will be yours. My only requirement is that you do not compromise your vision." He leaned forward slightly, the intensity in his gaze deepening. "For years, I have been surrounded by men like your husband. Men who perform confidence, who mistake bluster for brilliance. They are tiresome. You are not tiresome. You are the most capable person in every room you've been in, and no one has had the sense to notice. I noticed. The simple declaration, "I noticed," struck her with more force than any compliment. It was the core of it all. To be seen correctly, to have her silence and endurance recognized not as weakness, but as strength under duress. She took a deep breath, the first one that seemed to reach the bottom of her lungs. "I'll need to see the contract, and I'll have my own lawyer review it." A genuine small smile touched the corner of his mouth. It transformed his severe face, making him look younger, more approachable. "Of course, I would expect nothing less." He stood, the audience seemingly concluded. "Anya has prepared the guest wing for you. Your things from the apartment will be retrieved tomorrow. We have security on the building. Marcus will not be able to get near you. Rest. We can discuss the details when you're ready." He started to walk toward the door to the main suite, then paused. "Ilara," he said, using her first name for the first time. It sounded different in his voice. Not a possession, but a designation. He was wrong. You are not a nobody. You are an inevitability. He left her then, alone with the city lights and the echo of his words. She looked out the window at the Triton Tower, her tower, piercing the night sky. It looked proud, defiant, and beautiful. For the first time in a very long time, so did she. The days that followed were a study in surreal efficiency. Ilara woke up in a bedroom larger than her entire former apartment, to a wardrobe of clothes in her exact size that had appeared overnight. Anya, Julian's assistant, was a phantom of perfect competence, anticipating every need before Ilara could voice it. A burner phone appeared on the nightstand with one number programmed in it, Julian's. A laptop materialized, loaded with the preliminary site plans for the Thorn headquarters campus. It was a gilded, frictionless world, and it terrified her. She was accustomed to struggle, to pushing against resistance. This effortless support felt like a trap. Every morning she woke up expecting the other shoe to drop, for the price of this sanctuary to be revealed. But the bill never came. There were no demands on her time, no subtle pressures, no expectations beyond her own recovery. She spent the first 48 hours mostly in silence, processing the whiplash of her life's dramatic upheaval. She thought about Marcus. She felt not hatred, but a profound, weary emptiness. He had been the sun in her solar system for so long, a toxic star whose gravity had warped her orbit. Now he was just a collapsing dwarf, fading from view. Julian's lawyers had sent over a summary. Marcus's firm was under a full financial audit. His partners had been bought out, and he was facing multiple lawsuits. It was a clinical, bloodless demolition. On the third day, she called her own lawyer, a sharp woman named Isabel she had consulted secretly months ago. She forwarded the employment contract Julian had sent. Isabel called back within an hour, audibly stunned. "Ilara, this isn't an employment contract," she said. "This is a partnership agreement. The compensation is astronomical. But more than that, it gives you complete creative autonomy, veto power over the board on all aesthetic and structural decisions, a budget that is essentially unlimited, ownership of all your designs. This is the kind of deal that legends get at the end of their careers, not the beginning." "Is it a cage, Isabel?" Ilara asked, the question that haunted her. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "No," Isabel said finally. "It's the opposite. It's a key to everything. The only person this contract binds is him. He's legally obligated to provide these resources. You, on the other hand, can walk away with 30 days' notice and retain the rights to any work you've completed. Ilara, who is this man?" That was the question, wasn't it? She found Julian on a private terrace attached to the suite, a starkly beautiful space with a single wind-swept pine tree growing from a massive stone planter. He was drinking coffee and reading from a tablet, dressed not in a suit, but in a simple gray Henley and dark trousers. The casual clothes made him seem more real, less of an archetype of power. My lawyer says you've offered me a kingdom, she said, her voice cutting through the morning quiet. He looked up, his expression unreadable. I'm offering you a foundation. What you build on it is up to you. Why? She asked, walking toward him. Why do all this for a stranger? You're not a stranger, he replied, setting the tablet aside. I've been studying your work for 6 months. I feel I know your mind better than I know most of my executives. And I am not a philanthropist. This is a strategic investment. I believe your talent will make my company billions and secure its legacy for the next century. I am a pragmatist, Ilara. She studied him, searching for the lie, the hidden angle. But his gaze was direct, his logic sound. It was the cold calculus of business, but beneath it, she sensed something else. A flicker of something that looked like recognition, a kinship of minds. I don't leave because things become complicated, she stated, more to herself than to him. It was a promise, a boundary. I know, he said simply. Complications are where you do your best work. The Triton design proves that. In the weeks that followed, they fell into a strange, quiet rhythm. They were two solitary planets who had found a shared orbit. They rarely spoke of their personal lives. Instead, they talked about architecture, about lines and light, about the philosophy of space, about the way a building could shape the lives of the people within it. He was a surprisingly astute student, his questions sharp and insightful. He understood the language of structure, of systems, of power, whether it was in a corporate hierarchy or a steel frame. She began to sketch tentatively at first, then with a growing, fierce passion. The ideas that had been dormant for a decade came flooding back. She filled notebooks with designs for the Thorne campus, concepts that were bold and revolutionary. She worked with a feverish intensity, exorcising the ghosts of her past with every confident pencil stroke. One evening, he brought her to a formal dinner. She had hesitated, the memory of the gala still raw. But this was different. It was a small, private affair at an old, elegant mansion. It was the home of his mother. Eleanor Thorne was a woman who seemed carved from granite and grace. She was in her 70s with piercing blue eyes and a posture that defied age. She greeted Alara not with pity or curiosity, but with a firm, appraising look. "So, you're the one," Eleanor said, her voice a dry, witty rasp. "The one who finally got Julian to talk about something other than quarterly reports. He's been insufferable, going on about cantilevered ethics and the poetic justice of load-bearing walls." Alara found herself smiling a real, unforced smile. Throughout dinner, Eleanor spoke to her as an equal, asking intelligent questions about her work, her past, her ambitions. She was a matriarch in the truest sense, the deep, quiet source of the Thorne family's power. She saw Alara's resilience, her quiet strength, and validated it without a single word of sympathy. "Some men think a quiet woman is a weak one," Eleanor said to her as they stood by a fireplace after dinner, Julian deep in conversation with another guest. "They mistake composure for cowardice. It's a fatal error in judgment. My son, for all his faults, has never made that mistake. He understands the power of silence." She placed a light, dry hand on Alara's arm. "You are safe here, my dear. Not because he is protecting you, but because you are one of us." The words settled into Alara's soul, a balm on a wound she didn't even know was still open. She was not a project. She was not a damsel. She was an equal. Meanwhile, Marcus was not going away quietly. His professional life was in ashes, but his arrogance remained. Humiliated and furious, he did the only thing a man like him could do. He escalated. He filed a frivolous, vindictive lawsuit against Alara, publicly accusing her of stealing his intellectual property, the designs for the Triton Tower. It was a desperate, pathetic attempt to rewrite history, to reclaim the narrative by shouting it the loudest. The news broke online, and for a day, Alara felt the old, cold dread return. His lies, now printed in headlines, felt like a violation. She saw Julian that evening in the library of his home, the news displayed on a large screen. "He is a fool," Julian said, his voice a low rumble of displeasure. He was not angry. He was annoyed, the way one might be at a persistent insect. "He's trying to drag my name through the mud," Alara said, her arms crossed tightly, "to make it so no one will ever hire me." "He seems to be operating under the delusion that someone other than me would be in a position to hire you," Julian replied dryly. He turned off the screen. "This changes nothing, except perhaps the timeline. He has just handed us the perfect stage on which to correct the public record, permanently." The stage was to be the annual Heritage Foundation charity auction, the most exclusive philanthropic event of the year. It was hosted by his mother, Eleanor. The entire city's elite would be there. Marcus, using a press pass obtained through a desperate call to a disgraced journalist, crashed the event. He was a man possessed, his expensive suit looking rumpled, his face slick with sweat. He was a ghost at the feast, haunting the edges of the glittering crowd until he saw her. Alara was standing with Julian and his mother, discussing the new pediatric wing the foundation was funding. She looked serene, dressed in a simple, architecturally precise black gown. She was no longer hiding. She was present. Marcus pushed his way through the crowd, his eyes wild. Two of his own hired security guards, thuggish men who looked out of place in the elegant ballroom, followed in his wake. "There you are," he snarled, his voice loud enough to make the nearby conversations halt. All eyes turned toward them. "I've been looking for you." Julian stepped slightly in front of Alara, a subtle, protective movement. Eleanor Thorne simply raised a disdainful eyebrow. "Marcus, you are not welcome here," Julian said, his tone flat and cold. "I'm not leaving without my wife," Marcus declared, playing to the gathering audience. "She is confused. She has been manipulated by this man. She has an obligation to me." He looked past Julian, his gaze locking on Alara. It was filled with a desperate, possessive fury. "Alara, stop this foolishness! Come home!" "She is not your wife, and this is not her home," Julian said. Marcus laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "And who is she then? She's nobody without me. I gave her everything." He jabbed a finger at her. "She is a thief who stole my work, and I have the legal filings to prove it." He turned to his two hulking guards. "Escort Miss Keene out. She's coming with me." The guards started to move forward. The crowd gasped. It was a shocking, brutish display. Alara felt a tremor of fear, but it was distant now, muffled by the new strength that had taken root within her. She did not shrink back. She stood her ground. She leaned in close to Julian, her lips brushing his ear, and whispered something. It was not a plea for help. It was a piece of information, a single, quiet name. Aegis Strategic Holdings. Julian's expression did not change, but a new, dangerous coldness entered his eyes. He looked at the two guards who had paused, uncertain, a few feet away. "Your employer is Titan Security Services," Julian stated. It wasn't a question. "They are a wholly owned subsidiary of Veritas Group, which was acquired 6 weeks ago in a private equity buyout by a parent company. That company is Aegis Strategic Holdings." He let the words hang in the air for a beat. The guards exchanged a nervous glance. This man knew their entire corporate structure. "I am the majority shareholder of Aegis Strategic Holdings," Julian finished, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying with the force of a thunderclap in the silent room. "Which means I own your company. I sign your paychecks. You will stand down, you will remove Mr. Vance from this building, and you will await my instructions regarding your continued employment. Is that understood?" The two men froze. Their faces paled. The blood drained from their expressions, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. They had not been hired to protect a man. They had been hired to menace the man who, for all intents and purposes, was their king. They nodded dumbly, their professional menace utterly dissolving. One of them turned and took Marcus by the arm, his grip now iron. "What are you doing?" Marcus shrieked, his composure finally shattering completely. "You work for me." "No, they don't," Julian said calmly. He took out his phone, its screen glowing in the dim light. He turned it so Marcus could see. And as of this morning, neither does anyone else at your firm, because I own that too. On the screen was a series of financial documents, acquisition notices, debt consolidations, title transfers. I own the bank that holds your business loans, Julian continued, his voice a methodical, devastating litany. I own the leasing company that holds the title to your office furniture and your car. I own the debt your partner sold me for pennies on the dollar. And as of 9 a.m. this morning, my holding company closed on the purchase of the mortgage for your penthouse. The one you bought with the bonus you received from the Triton Tower project. He swiped the screen. This is an eviction notice. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. You are not just bankrupt, Marcus. You are a man without assets. You have nothing. You are a nobody. The words, his own cruel words, turned back on him, struck Marcus with physical force. He staggered back, his face a canvas of utter disbelief and horror. The intricate web of lies and bluster that constituted his life had been bought, packaged, and deleted. His reality had been foreclosed on. He made a choked, sobbing sound. His knees buckled. Marcus Vance, the titan of industry, the man of the hour, collapsed onto the marble floor of the ballroom, a weeping, broken heap. The guards, now acting with the swift efficiency of men whose careers depended on it, hauled him to his feet and dragged him from the room, his pathetic sobs echoing behind him. A stunned, absolute silence held the room captive. Then, Eleanor Thorne, with the impeccable timing of a seasoned conductor, stepped forward. "Well," she announced to the breathless crowd, her voice dripping with dry wit. "That certainly livens up the auction. Now, shall we move on to the bidding for the Napa Valley Vineyard tour?" The tension broke. A ripple of nervous laughter went through the room. The crisis was over. The story was already cementing into legend. Later that night, long after the auction had concluded with record-breaking donations, Julian brought Alara to the stage. The ballroom was still filled with the most powerful people in the city, their curiosity about the quiet woman at Julian Thorne's side palpable. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian said, his voice amplified by the microphone, carrying a warmth and pride that no one had ever heard from him before. "Tonight, we have celebrated the future of this city by investing in its heritage. Thorne Industries is also committed to investing in its future. As many of you know, we are building a new global headquarters, a project that will redefine our skyline for the next century." He paused and turned to Alara, extending a hand to her. "It is my profound honor to announce that this vision will be realized by a singular, brilliant talent, a woman whose work you have already admired, even if you did not know her name." He looked out at the sea of faces. The true designer of the Triton Tower, the mind behind its grace and its strength, and the lead architect for the new Thorne Global Campus, is Miss Alara Keene. He gently guided her forward into the spotlight. A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd, followed by a sudden, explosive wave of applause. It was a sound of recognition, of correction, of vindication. It washed over her, not as noise, but as a tide of acceptance. Her name, her real name, was being spoken in this room, attached to her work, her triumph. She looked out at the faces, shocked, admiring, respectful, and for the first time, she felt like she was in the right place, in the right skin. They didn't stay long after that. They left the buzz of the party and retreated to the quiet solitude of the penthouse terrace. The city glittered below them, a galaxy of man-made stars. The air was cool and clean. Alara walked to the edge of the terrace, the wind catching the hem of her gown. She leaned against the railing and took a long, slow breath. It felt like the first breath of a new life. The weight that had been sitting on her chest for 10 years, a constant, dull pressure, was finally completely gone. In its place was a quiet, steady peace. Julian came to stand beside her. He didn't speak, simply shared the silence with her. It was a comfortable silence now, built on a foundation of mutual respect. "Thank you," she said softly, not looking at him, "for everything." "I did what was necessary," he replied, his voice a low murmur beside her. "You did the hard part, You endured, and you created. She finally turned to face him. In the soft glow of the city lights, his severe features were softened. She saw not just the powerful CEO, but the man who saw value where others saw nothing, the man who understood the strength in quiet things. "My mother likes you," he said, a faint smile on his lips. "She said you have good bones." I believe she was speaking architecturally. Ilara laughed, a genuine light sound. "I like her too. She's formidable." "She gets that from me." He deadpanned, and she laughed again. He reached into his jacket and pulled out not a contract, but a single elegant fountain pen and a leather-bound sketchbook. He offered them to her. "The first of your new tools," he said. "The campus. It's a blank slate. What do you want to build?" She took the pen, its weight cool and solid in her hand. She looked from his steady, expectant gaze to the sprawling city beyond, a landscape of infinite possibility. She was not his employee. She was not his ward. She was his partner. They were two builders standing on a precipice about to shape the future. Her smile, a real one, finally reached her eyes. "Something that will last," she said, and together they turned to look out at the skyline they were about to change forever.